Hello luminaries, welcome to the Meshiuma. Please join us as we browse Reddit. This story was brought to us by Scott. I used to work in a disability shared accommodation agency. It's a job where you support 4 to 6 people with disabilities who share the accommodation. It's shift work, 2 clients per staff member during the day, 1 staff member on a sleepover at night. The rosters are 4-week rotating rosters. I was employed as a 0.75, meaning I work 75% of what is considered full-time, equating to 57 hours a fortnight. Working shifts sucked, but the pay was good. I was working in a house I'll call Sunup. Sunup had 4 residents and 7 workers. Each house had a house supervisor. They reported to the cluster manager, who managed 6 houses. Cluster managers report to the CEO. By company policy, leave requests are first and best dressed, meaning you need to put your leave in early to ensure you get it. I was transferred to Sunup from a 6-client house due to my qualifications and situations I cannot legally disclose. I worked for the first year, got to know staff, clients, house supervisor, etc. There was an obvious clique between 4 staff members. Each school holiday, 3 would apply for leave, and 1 would call in sick with a medical certificate covering the same amount of time. They would always rotate who is sick to hide what they were up to. They were friends outside of work who would party together. After a year, the house supervisor fell sick. One of the clique members, Karen, was appointed acting supervisor and it went to hell. She tried reducing my hours and giving extra time to a friend. I pointed out that I'm contracted for 57 hours a fortnight, so I'm getting paid for 57 hours a fortnight. Her friends got extra shifts. We're given the best shifts and we're all around favored by Karen. In January, I put in leave for March school holidays. Karen rejected on the grounds that others had already submitted leave. Her clique all applied for this time. I left this alone. In March I checked the leave calendar for the June school holidays. Each house had a leave calendar so management and staff can check whose scheduled leave is. It was empty. I submitted leave again and it was rejected. Karen said, "Sorry, you were too slow." Karen said that A, B and C clique already submitted leave. The next day the leave calendar showed this. In May I checked Christmas leave calendar, put in my leave and sure enough, got the same result. This annoyed me as I have a family that I wanted to take on holiday. I spoke to the cluster manager, also a part of the clique, who said there's nothing I can do. Note, I had no leave taken in 2 years. January the following year, the clique was on holiday. We had a gastro outbreak across our facilities so we were short staff. All available staff, including CEO, were covering shifts. I was rostered on with the CEO 1 shift. During the shift he said to me,
"Scott, you have a bit of leave accumulated. You should probably take some."
I put in 3 requests last year, all were rejected as others apparently already applied for those dates.
Let's lock in your leave now.
Okay, how about 4 weeks over Christmas? I filled out the form, CEO signed it off. He filled out the leave calendar and put my application in Karen's pigeonhole. I was on sleepover that night so I took my application, photocopied it for myself and replaced under the mountain of paperwork in her pigeonhole knowing she wouldn't see it for a few months. In March I checked the leave calendar. I noticed my Christmas leave disappeared replaced with Karen, A, B and C. I didn't say anything as I had a leave form with CEO's signature. Fast forward October, original house supervisor passed away. Acting supervisor was appointed permanent supervisor by the cluster manager, with a mandatory 3-month probation. December comes around, first week of my leave, I get a call from Karen.
"Where are you?"
On leave.
"I didn't approve of any leave. Get your butt to work now."
I come in, Karen chews me out stating she didn't get an application form. Karen went on to say,
"Even if you submitted it I would reject it as you should know by now that we always take 2 weeks in December/January.
She wrote me up for insubordination. I worked that shift. When Karen left, I emailed the CEO filling him in on what happened. He called a meeting with me and Karen.
What happened?
Scott took it upon himself to approve leave. I wrote him up for skipping work.
Actually, I submitted leave in January, while you were away.
No you didn't.
Yes he did. I approved it and added it to the leave calendar.
Oh, we already had 4 staff booked on leave.
Show me the leave forms.
I destroyed them.
I hand Karen my copy of my form signed by the CEO.
Scott is on leave. I'm going to Sunup and I'm investigating this situation. Scott, my apologies, go home. I'm extending your leave by an extra week.
I go home. I come in 4.5 weeks later to be told that Karen has lost her promotion. She's on thin ice. CEO found out that Karen has been rejecting leave requests. She shredded my request without looking past the date. She deleted my leave from the calendar. The CEO told Karen that this borders on fraud. The CEO also separated the clique to different houses. He changed the leave policy to state that he must sign off leave requests, in addition to house supervisor and cluster managers. He ensured that all staff had access to prime leave dates. Karen was fired 2 weeks later for failing audit requirements. Such rampant and unabashed favoritism. It is a travesty that Scott had to have a freak occurrence take place and then escalate the matter to the CEO, in order to receive fair treatment.
This was brought to us by Anti-Patty Co. This happened years ago at what would turn out to be my last year at a Catholic school, for reasons that will become obvious. I don't have anything against people of faith, but it was not my thing, very early on. I was 12 years old and in 7th grade. I was becoming disenchanted with my Catholic upbringing. I had so many questions, and it might have saved my faith to have them answered reasonably. The adults didn't want to reason with a curious 12-year-old. They wanted to see a nice Catholic girl who didn't feel compelled to make so much distasteful noise. Sex ed was still a part of any Catholic curriculum, and as it turned out, my religion teacher, Mrs. M, was also my sex ed teacher. When she opened up our first sex ed class with,
"Now, I'm just as embarrassed to be here as you are,"
I didn't see it as an expression of empathy. I saw it as a grown woman, humiliated to be teaching basic biology. It made me sad. Junior high sex ed wasn't just biology, though. It was an effort to shape our view of the world. Mrs. M taught us sexual health as per Catholic doctrine, and also peppered in some of her own weird, personal viewpoints, shaped by her own history, I guess. We had this box at the front of the class where we could discreetly write down and drop off the questions we were too nervous to ask out loud. Someone asked what orgasms feel like for women. We knew men ejaculate, but what do women do? Mrs. M did not explain, perhaps because she hadn't had one a day in her life. She said,
"The women's orgasm is not a necessary part of sex. It is not necessary for procreation, and sex is for the purposes of procreation."
That sounded very dodgy to me. I brought her statement home to my mother, who had always been very open with me about these things. I asked her if women really weren't supposed to enjoy sex all that much. She was horrified. She told me lots of men like to make women feel good, and sex should feel good for everyone. Then she said something that would be lastingly valuable.
Ask questions in that class. Teachers are supposed to answer your questions, and if they can't, maybe they shouldn't be teachers.
The next class, Mrs. M taught us that homosexuality was a sin. This was too much for me. I had a gay uncle who had been a huge fixture in my life. I felt attractions to girls in my class, and I refused to believe God would think who you love is worthy of hellfire. She went on to say gay marriage was both impossible and wrong. I raised my hand and asked her plaintively, "Why is gay marriage wrong?" Her answer was,
"Because they cannot procreate, and procreation is the purpose of marriage."
I sat silently. I didn't demonstrate agreement nor dissent. I went home and thought about that for a while. I needed to come back to sex ed class with an inquiry that was going to properly freak Mrs. M's crap up. It didn't seem like an easy task, but I came up with something I thought was worth trying out. The next sex ed class rolled around. Mrs. M taught whatever stuffy, deplorable lesson she had in the plan, then she opened up the class to questions. I raised my hand, she called on me, and I said, "If a woman is infertile, but she really loves the man she's with and wants to share the sacrament of marriage with him, does the church approve the marriage?" It was a no-brainer for her.
"Of course."
I followed up with, "But she can't have children, and marriage is for procreation. Why can she get married, but 2 men or 2 women who can't procreate can't?" Anyone who is seasoned in Christian apologetics can explain this one pretty easily. But I had hit Mrs. M somewhere deeply personal in front of 30 other children. Mrs. M was a married woman of around 50 or so, with no children of her own. Very unusual for a Catholic woman who doesn't believe in birth control. Mrs. M was infertile, and to her, I was questioning the sanctity of her marriage, and its validity in the eyes of the God she'd dedicated her life to. It was a sucker punch, and she couldn't collect herself to punch back. She instead flew into a rage. Her face became a deep shade of red as she said,
"This is not a debate class," and
sent me to the office. For context, I didn't know Mrs. M was infertile, It's something my mother told me post office battle. An apology letter was determined to be insufficient by Mrs. M. My mom came to collect me, and a battle ensued. Mrs. M wanted blood by way of suspension, and my mother was having none of it. Curious kids don't get suspended for questioning what they're taught. The only thing that worked in my favor was my history of being a nerdy, non-disruptive child with good grades. A compromise was struck. I wouldn't get suspended, but I could not participate in sex ed class, nor religion class. My grades in those classes would be determined solely by the written portions. These written portions were completed at a desk positioned outside the classroom, which Mrs. M smugly carried out for me every class. I didn't mind working outside of the classroom, because to me, it was a good example of the ease in which an adult can collapse under a child's questioning. I decided that religion and sex ed would become my specialty classes. I would master the curriculum, I would get the best grades I could, and Mrs. M would have to watch it happen. I worked very hard, harder than I had in any other classes. I studied at length and did additional research online. I finished out the semester with about 95% in sex ed, and 98% in religion. The final exams for both classes were entirely multiple choice. I was permitted into the classroom to be supervised for the exams, and there was no room for her biases to creep into her grading. She passed me the Scantron sheet back for my religion exam. 100%. I thanked her with a saccharine smile. She fixed me with a grim expression before moving on to the next classmate. A few days later, it was the Scantron sheet for the sex ed exam. 100%. I said, "Thank you for all you've taught me," as I smiled up at her. She said something under her breath and moved on. Mrs. M hated me with a distinctly un-Christ-like passion, and she found other ways to express it in the following semester. It warms my heart a little to think of her having to grade all my schoolwork, one correct answer after the other. The relentlessly curious, heretic nerd girl was a pain in her side that wouldn't go away. Worst of all, she demonstrated that she understood what you were teaching. She just didn't believe in it. TLDR. My Catholic sex ed teacher tried to punish me for questioning doctrine, a compromise punishment was struck, and I in turn resolved to ace all her classes. She hated me with a passion, had to grade all my assignments correctly, and watched me get honors. Mrs. M was reprehensible. To go up to Anti-Patico's mother saying, "Someone that cannot answer a question and is not willing to get the answer, should not be a teacher."
This is another story from Scott's time at Sunup working under a Karen. One day while I was working at Sunup, one resident was Tom. Tom was wheelchair-bound, nonverbal that had a neurologist appointment in a few months. I received a call from the clinic advising me of a cancellation appointment the following day at 9:30 a.m. that is now available. I accepted the appointment, called the cluster manager. It was a rostered day off for Karen, who asked me to work the following morning from 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. and take Tom to this appointment. I accepted and the cluster manager said she will email Karen and let her know. The following day I got to Sunup at 8:55 a.m., clocked on and said hello to Tom as the previous workers left. I started to prepare Tom for the outing. I heard Karen enter the house at 9:05 a.m. I walked down to meet her and was met with,
"What the hell are you doing here? You're not working today. Go home."
I tried to explain.
Did I stutter? I said go home. I did not ask you to work, so I'm not paying you to work.
Cue the malicious compliance. I walked over to the docking station, clocked out and said, "Okay Karen, as you requested, I'm off." "Oh. Tom has an appointment at 9:30 a.m. He is watching TV and he is ready to go. Taxi will be here soon. Cluster manager emailed you with the details. I'll see you tomorrow for my next shift." As I left she said,
Wait, what?
I closed the front door and walked to my car and drove off. Karen called my mobile.
Why didn't you tell me about the appointment? Can you come back and take him? I'll authorize the pay.
No, cluster manager asked me to come in today at 9 a.m. I started today at 9 a.m. You dismissed me at 9:05 a.m., as per our award as I was requested to work, and I showed up at work. I'm getting paid the minimum 3.5 hours.
Well, as you're getting paid, you need to come back in and work it.
Well Karen, you did dismiss me and I clocked out. If I came back, I'm no longer covered under the organization's insurance as I'm not clocked on. I'm entitled to 3.5 hours of work and I will be paid the 3.5 hours.
Just clock back on.
Well, I can't. The award also states I'm entitled to a 3-hour break between shifts. I don't know if you're aware, but I did just clock out and after that shift I'm tired. Even if I did, that means you need to pay me an additional 3.5 hours. I don't think payroll would be happy paying me 7 hours for a 1-hour medical appointment.
We will discuss this tomorrow.
Karen hung up on me. I called the cluster manager and informed her of the situation. Even though she is a close friend of Karen, she acknowledges I was in the right and ensured I'd be getting paid. Karen did not bring it up again. TLDR, rude. Karen paid me 3.5 hours of pay for 10 minutes of work. Edit. Karen did take Tom to his appointment. Yet again, Karen speaks too aggressively and assuredly without having a proper understanding of the situation at hand. It would be a mystery why she was not fired sooner, if we did not already know the person she directly reported to was her friend. Thank you for listening, luminaries. Kindly like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Lastly, please indulge me by pondering this. Be careful when deciding someone is your enemy. An enemy made is a friend forfeited. Until next time, luminaries.